7 divisions down and one more to go. I've finally gotten to the AFC West. And what better place to start than the Oakland Raiders? Yeah, it doesn't even sound right to say that anymore because it's been years since the Raiders have been anything close to the Raiders. One of the most dysfunctional, incompetent organizations, not only in the National Football League, but you would argue all of professional sports over the past decade plus. This organization is still paying the price for the senility with which Al Davis ran this organization into the ground in the final years of his life. Sorry, Raiders fans, but you know damn good and well it is true. Now, hope was kind of springing eternal for the Raiders, I guess, heading into this offseason because there was this thought of, now they've put a little bit of an emphasis on building through the draft, and they're going to have a ton of money available in free agency. They're way under the salary cap. This is a team that could make some big splashy signings and make some significant improvements heading into 2014. Except the Raiders are the freaking Raiders. Do I need to bring up the Roger Saffold debacle? You were going to pay this guy huge money, and then Mark Davis, the owner, says, flunk him on the physical. We don't want him. You talk about a disconnect between the owner and the front office, the general manager, Reggie McKenzie in particular. You're talking about the Roger Saffold deal. But here's a team that won, 4 games last season and lost arguably their 3 best players off of their 2013 team. For some inexplicable reason, the Raiders let Jared Veldheer go, they let Lamar Houston go, and they let Rashard Jennings go. And I don't get it. Now, somebody's going to sit there and say, well, maybe those guys didn't want to play there. Maybe those guys weren't part of the Raiders' plans in the long term. Or maybe the Raiders just don't have a long-term plan. And furthermore, maybe Reggie McKenzie is in over his head because you have both Veldheer and Houston, and you had the franchise tag, and you failed to utilize it on either one of them. It's one thing if one of those two decides, hey, the Raiders can offer me more money, but this place is such a dysfunctional black hole that I don't want to fucking be here. I want to go somewhere else. So be it. There's only so much you can control. I understand that. Even though if you pony up the dough, more likely than not, the player probably would have stayed. But to not even utilize the franchise tag on your 2 best players, either one of them, in Veldheer or Houston, to me was completely ridiculous. And it just shows to me the gross incompetence of the people running the Oakland Raiders organization. So you let arguably your 3 best players go, and definitely your 2 best players. And you could say Veldheer missed a good portion of the season last year with injury, and I get that. But he was still one of your best players on your team. You just let him walk away for nothing. And you decide that you're going to make big moves in the offseason by trading for Matt Schaub and signing Maurice Jones-Drew and Justin Tuck and a 3-4 outside linebacker to play 4-3 defensive end in Lamar Woodley. And you're going to bring in Carlos Rogers and Donald Penn. It's one thing to be bad. It's another thing to be bad, dumb, and old. The Raiders are bad. They're dumb. And they're incredibly old. If I'm not mistaken, they're the oldest team in the National Football League. At least you could say if they were the youngest team and they were bad, they were building towards the future and they were trying to go about doing things the right way, building through the draft, building with youth, getting that infrastructure in place, taking your time, taking the steps along the way. It's like the Raiders here had a bunch of money burning a hole in their pocket, and they realized they were in a bad way, and they had to spend it on somebody at some point in time, so they decided to get even older when the team was already old in 2013, the team that went 4-12. They went down that free agency route last year, and it didn't work. They did the same type of things again in free agency this year, and they're expecting to have any different results, and I just don't see where it's going to happen. I didn't intend this to just turn into an Oakland Raiders bash piece, but frankly, it deserves to because that's how ridiculous this organization has been over the past decade plus. Now, looking ahead to 2014, to be fair to this organization, they do have some things that I do like. I like their wide receiving core. You did bring in James Jones. You got other guys like Streeter in the mix and Holmes in the mix. There are guys in their wide receiving core that I do like. There are actually some decent weapons there in Oakland, believe it or not. Even a guy like a Denarius Moore, some decent weapons in place. I also like the running back tandem of Maurice Jones-Drew and Darren McFadden, and I think you could throw Marcel Reese into there. So you have some solid, at least you'd say, skill position players. There are some NFL teams that are in a bad way in those areas and wish that they had the talent at wide receiver and running back, frankly, that the Oakland Raiders do. I also like their outside linebackers on defense. You've got C.O. Moore, their third-round pick last year, who I thought played well. And then, of course, the player that I had rated as the number one prospect in the 2014 NFL draft, that's Khalil Mack, the fifth overall pick out of Buffalo. You're talking about a young, athletic tandem at outside linebacker. And if the Raiders eventually make that transition to the 3-4 defense, which I think they need to do, which I think will be in their future, then you've got a pair of potentially great pass rushing 3-4 outside linebackers in Mack and Moore. And that's going to be an interesting tandem to watch for me heading into this season. Question marks. Where aren't there question marks in other places? You look at quarterback. You bring in noodle-armed Matt Schaub. They drafted Derek Carr in the second round. Somebody's going to start. Is it going to be Carr right away? Frankly, at this point, they're going to be so damn bad, they might as well play Derek Carr right away and see what the hell they got. I question their secondary. They've got names like Carlos Rogers and Charles Woodson. But that doesn't mean their secondary is any fucking good. And you look at 2012 first-round pick DJ Hayden, fast on the path to being a total and complete washout bust in the National Football League. Their defensive line is going to suffer a little bit with the loss of Lamar Houston. I have severe questions about their offensive line with the loss of Jared Veld here. I don't have as many questions about the offensive line, let's say, compared to the secondary in particular, but it's still a question mark for this team. And unfortunately for the Oakland Raiders, they find themselves in a bad way in terms of the schedule for the season to come. They've got to play the AFC East. They've got to play the NFC West. They've got to play Houston. They've got to play Cleveland. And then they got to play the other teams in the AFC West as well. So let's look at this really quickly. The Oakland Raiders in 2014 have to play New England. They have to play Houston, who should be improved. Cleveland, who should be improved and a better team than the Raiders. They have to play Seattle, San Francisco, Arizona, St. Louis, Denver twice, San Diego twice, Kansas City twice. That's rough. That's why a lot of people are thinking that the Raiders might end up with the worst record in the National Football League in 2014. Because when you look at that schedule, it's brutal. And I would fully anticipate that by the end of the season, the Raiders will have one of the three toughest schedules as it plays out in all of the league. Ultimately, I think 2014 looks like it's going to be a disaster for the Oakland Raiders. They had all of this money available in free agency, and I think they pissed it down their legs and they squandered the opportunity. You allow your best players like Veldier in Houston and Rashard Jennings to leave, and you replace them with guys that are even older, guys like Donald Penn, guys like Carlos Rogers and Justin Tuck and Lamar Woodley. And Woodley, a guy that's had some good success in his system in Pittsburgh in the past, but now you're asking him at the age of, I believe he's 30, if not older, to play an entirely different position in an entirely different scheme. I don't get this organization. This team reminds me a bit of maybe the 2010 Carolina Panthers. They spent a second-round pick and quarterback in Jimmy Clausen, and they had a disastrous season and ended up getting the number one overall pick in 2011, which they turned into Cam Newton. And I fully expect the Oakland Raiders to be on the hunt for Marcus Mariota or a Brett Hundley or a Jameis Winston, whoever ends up being the number one quarterback in the 2015 NFL draft. One of them's going number one overall. I will guarantee that. And the Oakland Raiders have clearly stamped their place to me as being the leaders out of the clubhouse in this competition. I expect this team to win no more than 4 games and fully expect them to be a 3-13 team, bringing up the butt-naked rear in the AFC West, the AFC, and frankly, the NFL as a whole.